Hi, welcome to Drift Stories. I am the voice that will stay with you tonight as you fall asleep. Tonight, we are going together to a very, very old city, Xi'an, which a long time ago had an even older name, Chang'an. Now, close your eyes. Let your breathing slowly sink down. The train you are on is slowing down, the light outside the window shifting from golden to bronze, and you know, Xi'an has arrived. Stepping out of the train station, the first thing you see is not tall buildings, it is a wall. A gray wall from over 1300 years ago, sitting quietly there in the dusk. Neither too tall nor too short, neither grand nor crumbling. Like an arm, the city has stretched out toward you, not to embrace you, just resting gently before you, saying, "You have arrived." The shadows on the square are pulled very long by the setting sun, each person walking in a different direction, yet all their shadows falling at the foot of that wall. You catch a scent in the air that you cannot quite name. Not the grease of the train station, not the dust of old buildings. It is lamb soup, cumin, grilled flatbread, and a particular coolness unique to autumn evenings, seeping out from between the bricks of the city wall, slipping into your collar. You stand there watching for a long time, long enough for the sky to turn from bronze to gray blue, the lanterns on the wall lighting up one by one, like a row of orange eyes opening across the rampart. You do not hurry to find a place to stay. Do not take out your phone to look at the map. You just stand on that square, like someone who has finally returned to Chang'an after 1,000 years. In the distance, the silhouette of the bell tower is only a dark outline in the twilight, but this shadow is not fading. It is waiting for darkness to fall so it can light up. You find the entrance to the city wall and walk up along the ramp. The ramp was made for horses in ancient times, not for you. But you still follow the hollows worn by hooves, step by step, upward. The top of the wall is much wider than you imagined. Not a narrow walkway, but a flat expanse wide enough for galloping horses and deploying troops, broad enough for 3 carriages to travel side by side. You place one hand on the gray bricks of the parapet. The sun has been baking them all day, and the bricks are still warm, but the wind has been blowing all afternoon, so the temperature is just right. Not scalding to the palm, not cold either, like a very, very old cat lying on the wall. And what you are touching is not brick, it is its fur, warmed by 1,000 years of sun. You walk slowly along the wall, the bricks beneath your feet, some new, some old, the new ones flat and even, the old ones pitted and rough. The pits are not just the marks of weathering. If you look closely, there are characters carved into the surface of the bricks, some clear, some blurred, the names and years left by the craftsmen when the bricks were fired. A person 1,300 years ago carved his name into a brick, not knowing that this brick would be touched, not knowing that your fingers would trace his name a millennium later. You suddenly realize this city wall is not a military fortification. It is a monument built from 4 million names, and beneath every name were a pair of hands, a family, a summer spent sweating beside a kiln fire. The wind blows across the top of the wall, carrying the coolness of the moat water and the faint fragrance of lamb from somewhere far away. You close your eyes and stand still for a moment, turning yourself into a brick too. No need to do anything. No need to go anywhere. Just stay here. Stay on top of the wall. Stay in that seam between dusk and night. You rent a bicycle on the city wall. The bike is old, the chain a little loose, making a rhythmic clicking sound as you ride, like a second hand ticking slowly. There is almost no one on the wall. Dusk has just passed. The tourists have all gone down, leaving only you and your old bicycle, and 14 kilometers of unbroken gray brick road. You ride very slowly, slowly enough to track with your eyes every street lamp lighting up below the wall. The wall is square, enclosing the heart of old Chang'an. You circle atop it, riding from the south gate to the west gate, from the west gate to the north gate. And at every corner, you catch sight of the bell tower. It remains at the very center of the walled square. No matter how you ride, no matter which corner you reach, you look up and it is there, like a chess piece nailed to the center of the board. The wind on your face is not cold, it is cool, carrying that hesitation between summer and autumn that belongs to late September and early October. And there is a hint of sweetness from roasted sweet potatoes, drifting up from some small alley below the wall. You slow down, nearly stopping at the parapet, watching the bell tower's lights come on one by one. First, the outline lights of the upturned eaves, then the warm glow of the tower body, and finally, the golden roof, shining against the deep blue sky like a piece of frozen moonlight. You count silently in your heart how many chimes this bell tower has heard in over 600 years. How many people have walked beneath it? The merchant caravans of the Ming dynasty, the examination candidates of the Qing dynasty, the students of the Republic era, and you, today, all of you have passed under its gaze. Only today, no one rings the bell. The sound of the bell sleeps inside the wood, sunk down together with the rain of all those years. You descend from the wall at the south gate and walk north along South Street. South Street is a straight central axis, and at its end is the bell tower. The streets of Xi'an do not wind and twist like those of other cities. They are square and orthogonal. The four great streets east, west, south, and north converging at the bell tower, like an enormous cross-stitch stretched across the Guangzhong plain. You stand in the underground passage beneath the bell tower, a Ming dynasty building over 600 years old above your head, the vibration of subway trains passing beneath your feet. You walk up from the southeast exit of the passage and look up. The bell tower is right before you. It is a little smaller than you imagined, but also more exquisite than in photographs. 3 tiers of upturned eaves, each layer gently curling upward. The bronze bells at the eaves corners swaying softly in the evening breeze. Their sound not loud, just enough to cut through the traffic and the voices. You walk around the bell tower once. East Street, West Street, South Street, North Street. The lights on each street are different. To the east, the cold white light of shopping malls. To the west, the warm yellow lanterns of Muslim Street. To the south, the road you came by. And to the north, stretching away, its end the train station, and the city wall where you arrived. You stand at the center of this crossroads and suddenly realize you are standing not at an intersection. You are standing at the very center of Chang'an. From over 1,000 years ago, the Vermilion Bird Avenue, the central axis of Tang dynasty Chang'an, extends southward right beneath your feet. Time has layered beneath you, layer upon layer. The Ming Dynasty Bell Tower rests atop the Tang Dynasty Vermilion Bird Avenue. Your footsteps rest atop the footprints of Ming Dynasty craftsmen. And the sound of traffic right now rests atop the cooking smoke of 100,000 households in Chang'an from 1,000 years ago. Less than 200 meters west of the bell tower stands the drum tower. If the bell tower is the heart of this city, the drum tower is the rhythm of its breathing. In ancient times, the morning bell and evening drum, the bell struck at dawn to open the city gates, the drum beaten at dusk to close them. When you arrive, the drum tower's lights have just come on. In front of the tower is a large open space. Old men sitting on stone benches playing chess, children riding scooters in circles, swallows wheeling around and around the upturned eaves. There are many swallows in Xi'an. They build their nests under the eaves of ancient buildings, generation after generation, living there longer than any human family. You look up at those swallows, drawing black arcs across the deep blue sky, fast as a sewing needle through cloth. On the south side of the drum tower hangs an enormous drum, a red drumhead, golden studs. The leather of the drumhead worn by the years into deep brown grain. You press your ear close. Of course, you cannot hear the drum beats of ancient times, but you seem to feel, deep within that layer of leather, the aftershock of the final strike still trembling, like the vocal cords of an old singer, no longer making sound, yet still quivering faintly. The setting sun has fully sunk. Street lamps, lanterns, and the outline lights of the tower all come on at once. The drum tower becomes a pyre woven from gold and crimson. You step back a few paces, find a stone bench at the edge of the square, and sit, watching this building over 600 years old burn in the night. But it burns very quietly, very slowly, like a candle. Turning into the small alley behind the drum tower, you enter Muslim Street. This is not a street, it is a maze. Gao Family Courtyard, Xi'an Market, Dapyuan, Beiguangji Street, each narrow lane leading to another narrow one, each narrower lane hung with orange lanterns. You step in from the quiet of the drum tower, as if diving from the water's surface to its depths. Your eyes are flooded with a sea of lights and signs, your ears filled with the clang of spatulas against iron woks, the sizzle of grilled meat dripping fat onto charcoal, the shouts of vendors in the authentic Guanzhong dialect calling out a bowl of lamb paomo, and your nose is overwhelmed by a tidal wave of aromas: cumin, chili, the charred fragrance of grilled lamb, the sweet richness of sugar-roasted chestnuts, clean sweetness of the white frost on dried persimmons, layer upon layer, each layer finding a different place in your sense of smell with precision. You are not exploring Muslim Street with your eyes, you are exploring it with your nose. The scent of every stall is a door. You push one open and enter. Just as you find your footing, the next door has already opened before you. You are in no hurry to find food. First you walk very slowly, letting the crowd carry you along. There are people all around you, but no one is rushing. Everyone is shuffling slowly, holding a skewer of grilled squid or a cup of pomegranate juice, eyes fixed on the sign of the next stall. In the tide of people, you are like a drifting bottle in no hurry, carried by the current, yet with a direction of your own. You stop in front of an old restaurant, one that looks very old. The storefront is modest, the characters on the plaque so faded they are barely legible, but the 5 or 6 people queuing at the door tell you this is the right place. You walk in, sit down, and order a bowl of lamb pomo. The server hands you a blue and white porcelain bowl, at the bottom of which lie 2 pieces of hard by G flatbread, and then she walks away. You know what this means: tearing the bread, not biting it with your mouth, but tearing the flatbread by hand into pieces the size of soybeans. This is not the restaurant cutting corners on labor. This is the rule of eating lamb pomo. The finer the bread is torn, the more flavor it absorbs when cooked. The larger the pieces, the more raw it tastes. You begin to tear slowly. A piece of flatbread is pulled apart between your fingers into smaller pieces, into crumbs, into bits smaller than soybeans. You discover there is a strange hypnotic effect in this labor. Your fingers need no command from your brain. They know on their own how to tear, how to use the pads of the fingertips rather than the nails, how to make every piece roughly the same size. Your mind during this time is empty. No destinations, no schedule, no anxiety about where to go next. Your world shrinks to the bottom of this blue and white porcelain bowl, a piece of flatbread being turned by you into a snowfall. As you tear and tear, it occurs to you that people in Xi'an have been tearing flatbread for hundreds of years. Those who have done the same thing as you include Persian merchants of the Tang dynasty, garrison soldiers of the Ming dynasty, examination candidates of the Qing dynasty. Your fingers have all crushed a piece of flatbread in a porcelain bowl. All spent a stretch of time among the crumbs of this bread, needing to think about nothing at all. After finishing the po'omo, you do not return to the main street. Instead, you turn into an even narrower lane, Huaqing Lane. It is as if someone pressed the mute button on Muslim Street. The voices, the clatter of spatulas, the shouts of vendors are all cut off at the corner, leaving only the sound of your footsteps tapping softly on the flagstone path. You walk very slowly because the lane is too narrow, so narrow that you could stretch out your arms and touch both walls at once, and because it is too dark, the gaps between lanterns grow wider and wider until deep inside there is almost no light at all, only that strip of sky above your head, cut by the eaves on both sides into a deep blue river. You walk about 200 meters, and suddenly the lane opens up, a wooden door appearing before you. The door is very old, the paint on it curling up like chapped lips, but the plaque hanging above it makes you hold your breath. Great Mosque. You push the door open and enter. The courtyard is utterly quiet, so quiet you can hear every step you take on the stone slabs. It does not look like the Islamic architecture you have seen elsewhere with domes and minarets. It is a Chinese courtyard with upturned eaves, a spirit screen, a moon gate. Only the prayer hall faces west toward Mecca. In the courtyard stands an old locust tree, its crown covering half the yard, moonlight leaking through the gaps in the leaves, spreading a layer of crushed silver on the ground. You stand in the courtyard for a long time. The clamor of Muslim Street is just 200 meters away. But here, 200 meters equals 2 different worlds. You walk out of Huaqing Lane, circle around from the other end of Muslim Street, and reach the foot of the city wall. The wall at night is completely different from the wall at dusk. By day, the wall is gray, like the spine of the earth rising up. At night, the wall is dyed golden by the lights reflected on the surface of the moat. The entire river, like a stream of molten bronze. You walk slowly along the moat. The water barely moves, still as a long mirror, the reflection of the wall trembling faintly on the surface, not from the wind, but from some invisible undercurrent breathing at the bottom of the water. There are people by the river, not tourists, but elderly locals, carrying small folding stools to sit beneath the willows by the water. Some playing chess, some listening to Xi'an opera on the radio. A raspy voice squeezing out of a palm-sized radio, singing an old tale about a general bidding farewell to his wife before marching to war. Then you hear another sound, very low, very hollow, like wind blowing through a cave, or like someone sighing from far away. It is a sheng, an ancient instrument fired from clay, played by the Banpo people of Xi'an more than 6,000 years ago. Under the willows, you find the person playing the sheng, an old man with graying hair, eyes closed, fingers pressing the holes of the clay sheng, upper lip against the blowing hole, lower lip slightly parted. He plays no melody, only a few notes, one lower than the next, one deeper than the next, as if speaking to the reflection of the city wall in the water. You stand there listening for a while, until the last note completely dissolves into the night, the surface of the moat returning to stillness, the reflection growing clear again. You have arrived at the South Gate. Its formal name is Yongning Gate, meaning eternal peace. The Yongning Gate at night is the most beautiful sight you have seen all day. The gate stands wide open, its 2 vermilion doors thrown back. The door studs golden, fist-sized bronze bosses arranged in 9 rows vertically and 9 horizontally. 9 was the greatest young number in ancient times, the number of the Son of Heaven, so only the gates of the imperial palace and the imperial city could use 9 rows of studs. Lanterns hang from the archway all the way to the top of the gate tower, tier upon tier, the color of the lanterns different on each level. At the very bottom, vermilion red, going up, orange yellow, higher still, amber, and at the very top it is not lanterns but warm white floodlights reflecting off the tiles of the hip and gable roof like a thin layer of snow falling on a golden rooftop. You cross the drawbridge. Beneath the bridge, the moat holds the entire gate upside down in the water. 2 Yongning gates, one above the water and one below, separated by a thin sheet of water, like 2 parallel worlds gazing at each other through a layer of glass. You walk underneath the archway and look up. The vault of the arch is far above you, over 10 meters high, the gray bricks curving up from both sides to meet overhead. You suddenly feel very small, not the smallness of oppression, but the smallness of shelter, like a child tucked under a blanket, knowing the world beyond the blanket is vast and wide. But with this blanket in place, you do not need to worry about anything. You turn west from the South Gate and walk into Defu Lane. Defu Lane is Xi'an Spar Street, a flagstone path lined on both sides with old houses left from the Republican era, converted into small bars and cafes. But tonight, you are not drinking. You are just passing through this street on your way back to the hotel. From every bar drift different sounds. One has a folk singer strumming, singing Chang'an, Chang'an, the guitar chords floating out the window and shattering on the flagstones. Another is a jazz bar, the low notes of a saxophone seeping through the crack of a wooden door, drifting through the lane like a dark silk scarf. Yet another is almost empty. Only the owner wiping glasses behind the bar, the clink of glass meeting glass, the softest music in the entire lane. You walk very slowly because the flagstone path gleams with a damp sheen in the night. Not from rain, but from the September dew already beginning to condense on the stone surface. Each step you take has a faint springiness to it, not from the soles of your shoes, but from an invisible patina worn into the stone by countless feet over hundreds of years. The lane is not long, 300 or 400 meters, but you feel you have walked it for a long time, because every window you pass, every door, a different melody drifts out, as if the whole street is speaking the same words with different instruments. Good night, good night, good night. By the time you reach the end of the lane, the guitar sound is already as distant as if it came from another city, and in your ears only your own footsteps remain, and the faint sound of wind drifting from the city wall far away. You return to the hotel. The room is not large, but it has a south-facing window. You pull back the curtains without turning on the light. The room filled only with the city's night glow filtering through the window, a diluted, soft amber. You sit in the chair by the window, looking out at Xi'an. You are not staying very high up, around the 6th or 7th floor, just high enough to see a patchwork of gray tiled rooftops, the tiles gleaming under the moonlight with a watery sheen, one overlapping the next, like the scales of a fish. Further away is the silhouette of a pagoda, the great wild goose pagoda. It is not lit up, just a dark outline, like an old calligraphy brush standing upright on rice paper. 7 stories, each tier smaller than the one below, drawing a gradated silhouette against the deep blue sky. You know that. When day breaks, you will go see it. Perhaps in the early morning, perhaps at dusk. But right now, you do not want to think about when day breaks. Right now is your last time looking out today. You gaze at the shadow of that pagoda, imagining Xuanzang of the Tang dynasty returning from his journey to India for scriptures, spending decades inside this pagoda, translating those Sanskrit sutras word by word into Chinese. Every character he translated carried the warmth of a long journey, carried the wind of the desert and the sandalwood fragrance of Nalanda Monastery. This pagoda has seen 110,000 nights over Chang'an, seen the bacon fires of the An-Lushan rebellion, seen the dying sun at the end of the Tang, seen the splendor of an entire empire settle layer by layer into the gray tiled rooftops beneath your feet today. And it says nothing. It just stands there, waiting for daybreak. You draw the curtains, but leave a crack. Let a sliver of moonlight fall on your pillow. You lie in bed, the sliver of moonlight slipping through the curtain crack falling right on your eyelids. Not bright, just enough to let you know you're still awake. In your heart, you retrace the path you walked today. The train station square, the gray bricks of the city wall, the clicking sound of the old bicycle chain, the draft in the underground passage beneath the bell tower, the swallows on the drum tower eaves, the overwhelming scent of cumin on Muslim Street, the piece of baiji flatbread you tore into snow at the bottom of a blue and white porcelain bowl, the quiet Chinese mosque at the end of Huaiju Lane, the low notes of the Xi'an played by an old man beneath the willows by the moat, the moment beneath the south gate archway, when you felt like a child standing at the foot of a giant's door. You walked this path over the course of a day, and now in your heart you walk it again. Walking and walking, you arrive at the foot of the great wild goose pagoda. You imagine yourself standing beneath it, looking up. 7 stories, each story smaller than the one below, like a tower of building blocks. But the bricks at the very bottom were fired in the year 652 AD. That year, Xuanzang was 49, 7 years back from India, and he carried the 657 Sanskrit sutras he had brought back into this pagoda. Every day, he climbed the pagoda at dawn, descended late at night, translating stroke by stroke under the candlelight at the top. While he was translating, what was the Chang'an outside doing? The morning market was selling freshly picked lotus root. The singing girls of Pingkang Ward were rehearsing new melodies. A Persian merchant was haggling in broken Chinese at the West Market. An examination candidate was buying ink at the East Market. The city was awake, and this pagoda was awake too. Over 1,300 years have passed, and the great wild goose pagoda has not slept a single night. Now, close your eyes. Let this pagoda that has not slept for 1,300 years keep watch over this night for you. You no longer need to keep watch over anything. On your first night in Xi'an, do not think of anything anymore. You have already walked far enough, from the city wall at dusk to the moat in the deep night, from the bustling clamor of Muslim Street to the mosque courtyard where there was only moonlight and no one else. Your feet remember the warmth of those gray bricks. Your nose still remembers the taste of cumin and grilled lime. Your ears still hold the low notes of the Xi'an and the sound of swallows' wings slicing through the air. You do not need them now. You can hand these memories over to the pillow, to that sliver of moonlight through the curtain crack, to the great wild goose pagoda outside the window that has not slept for 1,300 years. It will keep watch for you. You only need to sleep. The city wall will always stand there. The bronze bells of the bell tower will keep swaying in the wind. The water of the moat will keep flowing slowly beneath the willow roots. They are all still there, and will still be there the next time you open your eyes. Now, take a deep breath, breathing the night of Xi'an and the 1,300-year coolness seeping from between the bricks of the ancient city wall. Breathe out every step of weariness from your journey today, from the train station to Defu Lane. Breathe once more. Breathe in the silhouette of the great wild goose pagoda in the moonlight, and the warmth of the flickering candlelight as Xuanzang translated the scriptures. Breathe out everything that has not yet happened. You are now in Chang'an, the Chang'an of the Tang, the Xi'an of the Ming, the Xi'an of today. They are the same city tonight, and you are one among countless people over 1,000 years who have closed their eyes inside this city. Good night, Chang'an. Good night. Last night, you rested your head against the shadow of the city wall, falling asleep in the sliver of moonlight that slipped through the curtain gap. Tonight, we travel east, out of the ancient city, to the foot of Mount Li, to see an army that has stood underground for 2,200 years. Now, close your eyes. 6 in the morning. You are at the giant wild goose pagoda square. The fountains have not yet come on. The pool is flat as a dust-covered mirror, reflecting the pagoda's gray silhouette upon its surface. The square is nearly empty. A few elderly figures in white Tai Chi uniforms move through their forms. So slow, you can barely tell they are moving at all. Arms pushing outward as if parting an invisible layer of water, drawing back as if gathering that water to the chest. The giant wild goose pagoda in the morning mist looks taller than it did last night from your hotel window and heavier. Last night, it was a weightless silhouette in the distance. Today, you stand at its base and feel the stone foundation buried in the earth for 1,000 years, pressing the entire Guangzhong plain downward. The square before the pagoda is paved with gray-blue square bricks, moss growing in the cracks between them. Not the moss of neglect and old age, but the kind that stubbornly grows back after being swept by morning brooms 10,000 times, as if the land itself is saying, "No matter how many layers of brick you lay, I will still grow through the cracks." You circle the pagoda once, pausing every few steps to look up. 7 stories from bottom to top, each tier of upturned eaves lifting slightly, the curve growing lighter with each ascending level until the 7th story's eaves nearly dissolve into the sky. You suddenly remember last night's image of Xuanzang translating sutras inside the pagoda, and you suddenly recall that this pagoda is called Wild Goose because long before Xuanzang, there was a famous Buddhist monastery in India, also called the Wild Goose Monastery. He carried the name back to Chang'an, as if bringing back from the banks of the Ganja a wild goose that would never fly away, letting it roost upon the yellow earth of the Guangzhong plain. Walking south from the giant wild goose pagoda, you reach the Shaanxi History Museum. By the time you arrive, the doors have just opened, and there are not many people yet. The main hall is dim, the display case lights lowered so that each artifact glows only within its own small halo of light, as if pressed down by its own time and weight, unable to emit any more radiance. You step into the first gallery, Shang and Zhou bronzes. They are not gold, they are green, a deep and heavy malachite green, the color that grows from the bones of bronze after 3,000 years of sleeping underground, a color archaeologists call patina, though in the gallery's dim light, it looks more like a frozen forest. You stop before a ding tripod. It is not large, 3 legs, 2 handles. Its belly cast with a ring of fine lines. Not mere decoration, but inscriptions. A letter cast in bronze 3,000 years ago by someone whose intended recipients were all descendants who could read these words. On the wall hangs a rubbing of the inscription with a transcription beside it, and you read it character by character. In a certain year, a certain month, on a certain day, for merit earned in a certain battle, the Zhou king bestowed this and this and this, and so this tripod was cast. May sons and grandsons and their grandsons treasure and use it forever. A faint tremor passes through your chest. May sons and grandsons and their grandsons treasure and use it forever. That person believed this tripod would sit forever in his family's ancestral hall, that his grandson's grandson's grandson would place the first bowl of new grain into it every first month. He did not know that his family line had long since scattered in some distant war. that this tripod slept beneath the earth for 30 centuries, unearthed by a loyang shovel from the yellow soil, and now sits inside a glass case, with you standing before it, standing in for those sons and grandsons who never came. You move forward from Shang and Zhou to Qin and Han, from Qin and Han to Sui and Tang. With each dynasty you pass, the objects in the cases grow lighter. Bronze tripods become lacquer plates become silver cups become porcelain bowls, and the porcelain bowl looks like something you might see in a tableware shop. A white base painted with a few strokes of blue scrolling floral patterns, the rim curving with the slightest arc, just right for pressing against the lips. It sits alone in its own display case, light falling directly from above, revealing a web of fine crackled glaze spreading outward from the bowl's center to its edge like a spider's web. The label reads, Tang Dynasty, blue and white porcelain bowl, unearthed, Xi'an West Street. That is all. You stare at the bowl for a long time. A person from the Tang Dynasty. A wife, a mother, someone whose cheeks were flushed by the cooking fire, once filled this bowl with hot soup and handed it to her husband or her child. The rim may still hold the warmth of someone's lips, but 1,300 years have passed. The warmth turned to crackle glaze. The person and the noodles at the bottom of the bowl dissolved into the trace elements of a stalk of wheat on today's Guangzhou plain. You place your hand on the glass, a single centimeter from the bowl. That centimeter is time and air, and the entire Tang Dynasty. You suddenly understand why museums are always so quiet. It is not because of the please remain silent signs. It is because every artifact is telling a very long story, and the voice telling it is very, very low, so low you must hold your breath to hear it. You leave the museum and board a bus heading east. The destination is Lintong, 30 kilometers from Xi'an, a ride of about 40 minutes. You take a window seat, forehead pressed to the glass, watching the Xi'an outside change little by little. First, streets and buildings. The buildings in the old city are not tall, because a height restriction mandates that no structure within the city walls may rise above the golden roof of the bell tower. So, Xi'an's skyline is flat, like a block of gray tofu framed by the walls. Then the suburbs. The buildings are still not tall, but the gaps between them widen, interspersed with construction sites and abandoned brick kilns. Yellow dust rising from the bare ground and trailing behind the wheels in a pale gold tail. Then the fields, another 10 minutes or so, and the buildings vanish from the window, replaced by the Guangzhou plain in autumn. Harvested cornfields reduced to dry stalks, standing row after row in the yellow-brown earth, like an army blown askew by the wind. The outline of Mount Li begins to emerge in the distance. Not very tall, far shorter than the Qin Mountains. But it stands alone on the plain, like a steam bun accidentally dropped onto the ground. The moment you see Mount Li, you know Lintong is near, because this mountain's shape is too distinctive, not sharp peaks, but gently undulating curves, like a person lying on their side, shoulders and knees wrapped in a thin layer of vegetation. The air outside the window begins to cool. The altitude has not risen much, but the farther you travel from the city, the cleaner the September wind becomes, so clean you can smell the flavor of the yellow earth itself, a scent of sun-dried soil ground fine by the wind. not fragrant, not sweet, just the smell of earth, as if the entire Guanzhong Plains autumn had been ground to powder and scattered into the breeze. You enter the main hall of Pit 1 at the Terracotta Warrior Museum. The hall is dim, deliberately dim, because the underground chamber of Shaanxi Huang's mausoleum 2,200 years ago was also dim, because these clay figures have stood in darkness for 2,200 years, and light is more foreign to them than time itself. You descend a few steps from the entrance platform, and then you stop. You stop not because of the crowd. The hall does have quite a few people, but no one makes a sound. Neither do you. Your throat feels blocked by something, not awe. Awe is a reaction of the mind. What you feel is lower, in your chest, in the pit of your stomach. What you face is not many clay figures. You face an entire battlefield frozen in time. 6,000 life-size terracotta warriors arranged in 40 columns. Each column separated by rammed earth walls, the walls still bearing the rotted remains of logs from 2,000 years ago. They were the ceiling, protecting the heads of this army below. Every figure faces east. Qingxi Huang's tomb lies to the west, and they guard him from the east, never once turning around in 2,200 years. You walk slowly along the platform, from one end to the other. With every step, you see more detail. The warriors in the front rows clutch real swords and spears. The blades long rusted into soil, the shafts dissolved into air, but the grip of the hands remains. The angle of the open thumb and forefinger still there. The warriors in the back rows carry no weapons. They are archers and crossbowmen, arms frozen in the posture of drawing a bow, the bow gone, the string gone, but the arc of the arm remains, like branches bent by 2,200 years of wind, waiting for a bow that will never come. You stop on the platform and raise an imaginary telescope, not a real one, but the act of narrowing your eyes, trying to make out the faces of the warriors in the nearest row, and then you discover the secret that everyone eventually discovers in the Terracotta Warrior Museum. Every face is different, not roughly different, entirely different. The curve of the eyebrows, the thickness of the lips, the width of the chin, the height of the cheekbones, even the shape of the ears. One warrior has very thick earlobes, so thick you imagine he was the one in the army who always ate well. One warrior has a prominent brow ridge, high enough to cast a small shadow beneath it, making him look as if he is pondering something. One warrior has the corners of his mouth turned slightly upward, not a smile. It is the kind of curve still hanging on the face after 2,200 years that is impossible to name, something between confidence and stubbornness. You count in your head. There are over 6,000 such warriors in this pit, over 6,000 unique faces, over 6,000 people who once breathed on this land, ate noodles, wiped sweat from their brows, wrote letters home on some distant evening. Their faces molded by a potter's hands, but their lives reclaimed by war, then taken underground by an emperor. No one knows whether these faces truly correspond to specific soldiers of the Qin army. Perhaps two potters sat facing each other, and one said, "I will mold my father's face," and the other said, "Then I will mold yours." You gaze into the eyes of the nearest warrior. The sockets are empty, no eyeballs within, but something in that shadow seems to be looking back at you. Not a threat, not a plea for help, but a patience accumulated over 2,200 years. "I have been waiting for you," and you have finally come. You walk to the center of the exhibition hall, where a separate glass case stands, and inside the case stands a warrior. No, he kneels, the kneeling archer, the most famous of all the terracotta warriors, because he is the only one so perfectly preserved after 2,200 years that even the treads on the soles of his shoes are still clearly visible. You circle to the back of the case and crouch down, truly crouch down, knees beginning to ache, to look at his shoe sole. The sole is not smooth. It is covered with rows of stitches, anti-slip treads carved one by one into the wet clay with a wooden knife by a potter 2,200 years ago. And it was not carved at random. It was modeled after the sole of a real hemp shoe, every stitch evenly spaced, every row of treads following a regular pattern of depth. And most astonishing of all, the heel of the sole is more worn than the ball of the foot. This means the owner of these shoes was someone who habitually pushed off with their heel. You crouch before the case for a long time. Not because you are studying Qing dynasty shoemaking. You crouch there because this one small detail has pierced straight through you. A potter in a kiln yard on some late autumn or deep winter day, crouching at the feet of an unfired clay figure, carving stitches into the sole with a knife stroke by stroke, knowing that the treads he was carving would never be seen once the figure stood upright, would never be seen once the figure was placed in the underground pit. But he carved them anyway. He was carving a real shoe. The heel was more worn than the ball of the foot, because the person whose face he held in his mind as he molded this shoe's owner was someone he knew, someone who walked with a heel-first stride, someone who lived for decades in a village at the foot of Mount Li, or on the outskirts of Xi'an. You walk from Pit 1 toward Pit 2. Pit 2 is smaller than Pit 1, but darker, and charged with a strange tension, because most of Pit 2 has not yet been excavated. The hall is lit almost solely by the green glow of emergency exit signs and a few low-wattage spotlights in the corners. Most of this space filled with darkness. But you know that beneath that darkness, beneath the layers of dust covers and backfilled earth covering the excavation units, more terracotta warriors are waiting. Archaeologists have driven dozens of test bores into the soil with a tool called the Luoyang shovel, each bore bringing up soil samples from different depths. Some bores bring up traces of rammed earth, indicating artificial structures below. Some bring up pottery shards, indicating shattered warriors. Some bring up nothing at all, just deeper and heavier yellow earth. But the silence itself is an answer. There is still something here, undiscovered. You stand at a railing and gaze out at a backfilled units, on the surface just flat yellow earth. But in your mind, you know that 2 meters beneath the soil, there is a row of crossbowmen. 3 meters deeper, perhaps a war chariot, and deeper still, no one has dug that far. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps a corridor concealing what Qing Shi Huang treasured most. And all of this still buried, not because the technology is lacking. It is the patience of archaeologists. They know what lies below, and they have chosen not to dig. They are leaving better tools, more complete recording methods, more unhurried time for the future. You suddenly feel that this choice is beautiful. 2,200 years they have waited. A few more decades is no rush. The buried warriors will not feel rushed either. They have learned the patience of soil, every layer of yellow earth a page of time. Turning too fast reveals nothing at all. You enter the bronze chariot exhibition hall. Inside there are only 2 chariots, but each is so large you can scarcely believe they are made of bronze. One is a standing chariot, open-topped, the command vehicle that led Qin Shi Huang's processions. One is a seated chariot with an enclosed cabin, the one Qin Shi Huang himself rode in. You walk slowly around the seated chariot. Bronze horses, bronze wheels, bronze cabin. Even the window panels carved with fine diamond-shaped open-work patterns. 2,200 years ago, a bronze smith used a pointed chisel and hammer to punch over 100 identical diamond holes into a sheet of bronze no thicker than a coin. And as he did this work, his breathing must have been very, very light. One heavy breath and the chisel would have slipped. And then you see the umbrella. In the center of the standing chariot rises a bronze umbrella pole, supporting a bronze canopy that shields the driver from sun and rain. But you notice the pole is not a straight rod. Its upper half can rotate. Its lower half contains a gear mechanism that can turn. The label reads, "This umbrella pole could be adjusted to tilt the canopy according to the direction of the sun, and could even be completely detached and used as a standalone shade. An umbrella that can turn, an invention from the 3rd century BC. You stand there for a long time, longer than you stood before any terracotta warrior. Because you feel this umbrella brings you closer to that era than 6,000 clay warriors ever could. The Qin dynasty was not just soldiers and bricks and legal codes as you imagined. The Qin dynasty also had a person sitting in a carriage sweating under the sun, and a craftsman who looked at him and said, 'Wait a moment, let me make something for you.' What he made was a bronze umbrella pole that could rotate, and an afternoon that no one else witnessed. This afternoon is not recorded in any history book, but it lives on in the gear before you, which can still turn after 2,200 years. You walk out of the museum. The autumn afternoon sun is not harsh, but emerging from halls so dark, you still squint for a moment. You sit on the steps at the museum entrance in no hurry to move on to the next place. A question turns in your mind. Why did Qin Shi Huang build the terracotta warriors? The textbooks say he wanted to bring his earthly power and army into the next world, but that feels too abstract. A person who possessed the largest empire in the known world, who commanded an army that conquered 6 kingdoms, who had the Fengshan altar on the summit of Mount Tai and palace complexes stretching 300 li across Xinjiang, and then he had 8,000 clay warriors fired and placed in the underground chamber at the foot of Mount Li. This is not an extension of power. It is something closer to a plea. He was pleading with eternity not to forget him. What he feared was not death itself, but that after death no one would remember him. So he fired 8,000 soldiers, every face different, every piece of armor bearing a serial number. He was using human faces to make a roster, each page a unique countenance, and bound together they say, "I existed." But 2,000 years later, what people remember is not Qin Shi Huang, but those nameless potters, the stitches they carved into the soles, the leather texture they pressed into the armor, the 100+ diamond openwork holes they chiseled into the bronze chariot. Qin Shi Huang wanted eternity, but the eternity he received was a museum, and those potters never thought about eternity. They were simply completing a task, molding a person's face from wet clay and sending it into an 800-degree kiln for 2 days. but they want true eternity. You stand up, brush the dust from your pants, and look back one last time at the museum's gray-white exterior, saying to yourself, "Let us go see the next 2,000-year-old hot spring." Less than 2 kilometers west of the Terracotta Warrior Museum lies Huaqing Pool. It leans against Mount Li and faces the town of Lintang. You arrive at 4 in the afternoon. The sunlight already shifted from direct to slanting, dyeing the western slope of Mount Li the color of caramel. Huaqing Pool is quite simply a hot spring, deep beneath the foot of Mount Li. A vein of natural hot water rises from the earth, a constant 43 degrees, rich in minerals, a bathing place for emperors and kings since the Western Zhou. But what made Huaqing Pool a special name in the hearts of Chinese people is a story from 1300 years ago. Emperor Xuanzong of Tang and his beloved consort Yang Guifei. You enter the garden. It is not the kind of gilded, faux ancient architectural compound. The garden is quiet. Few visitors, steam rising in fine threads from the stone-lined pools, scattered and gathered again by the evening breeze. You walk to the lotus pool, said to be Yang Guifei's private bath. It is not large and irregular oval. Its walls built of gray stone, a carved stone lotus resting at the bottom. 1,300 years have passed, the stone lotus petals worn smooth, the hot spring water having softened every edge. You crouch down and dip your hand into the water. 43 degrees, not scalding, just slightly warmer than body temperature. You close your eyes and soak your hand in the same hot spring that Yang Guifei once bathed in. You do not think about history. History is too heavy, not something to contemplate while soaking in a hot spring. You think only about temperature, about the sensation of your own skin meeting this warm water, the water rising over your wrist, through the spaces between your fingers, all the aches and fatigue dissolving at 43 degrees, flowing back along your veins toward your heart. You leave Huaqing Pool and begin walking slowly up the stone steps of Mount Li. The steps are not steep, but they are long, one after another. The pines and cypresses on either side, giving off a dry resinous scent in the autumn evening, mingling with the hot spring vapor drifting up from below to create a strange fragrance, warm and crisp at once, like the smell of standing in a pine forest after soaking in a hot spring. You do not walk fast. The steps are covered in pine needles, and stepping on them gives not the sensation of stepping on stone, but of a soft, dry pine needle carpet, a soft rustling rising from beneath your feet, like Mount Li clearing its throat with a very old voice. 40 minutes later, you stop on a flat platform halfway up the mountain. You turn around and look back. The town of Lintang spreads out beneath you, twilight enveloping the small town in a veil of gray-blue. The roofs of Huaqing Pool stacked like dark red building blocks at the mountain's base, and beyond, the plain, the fields, a string of tiny moving lights on the highway. Those are cars heading back to Xi'an, departing Lintang, taking the expressway, 30 minutes to the bell tower. You sit down on a stone bench on this platform. The wind comes, not a cool wind. It is that peculiar neither hot nor cold wind of the mountainside, brushing across your face, still moist from the hot spring vapor, like a towel left to cool. You suddenly want to sit on this bench for a long time, not to look at the view, but to say to yourself, Just sit here a while and think of nothing. Mount Li, behind you like an enormous backrest, and you lean against it, watching the world below darken bit by bit. You sit on the stone bench for a long time, perhaps 20 minutes, perhaps longer. You did not check your watch. You stand up and continue climbing for a stretch, but near the summit you stop, not from fatigue. You suddenly do not want to reach the top. You feel that some mountains are meant to be climbed, and some are meant to be viewed from halfway up, and Mount Li is the latter. You turn and walk down. Descending footsteps are far later than ascending ones. On the way up, all your strength went into pushing off and lifting your knees. On the way down, gravity does most of the work. You only need to control your speed. Keep your knees from rushing too fast. As you walk, you watch the west. The sun is setting, but its direction is not the opposite side of Mount Li. It is to the west of Mount Li, the direction you set out from this morning. The direction of Xi'an, the direction of Chang'an. You are not sure if the sun always sets in the direction of Chang'an, but you tell yourself, today, yes it does. Today's setting sun chose to fall in the direction of Chang'an, and you chose to watch it from the descending path. The sky changes quickly, from gray blue to deep blue, from deep blue to ink blue. By the time you reach the foot of the mountain, the gates of Huaqing Pool are already closed. A single lonely lantern glowing beneath the eaves of the gate, its red light cast upon the trunk of an old locust tree across the way, like a fading spring festival couplet. You stand beneath that locust tree and look back one last time at Mount Li. It has turned completely black. A vast and quiet figure lying on its side, asleep on the eastern edge of the Guangzhong Plain. You board a bus back to Xi'an. Not many people on board. Night has fallen. Most visitors have either left long ago or are staying in Lintang. You take the last row, a window seat, and press your forehead to the glass. The glass is very cool. The September night wind having blown all day. The outside of the window much colder than the inside of the bus. When the bus starts, the engine shudders. The entire frame clanks once, like a yawn. The bus leaves Lintang's urban area and enters the unlit national highway. Outside the window, only two colors remain. Black is the fields and the mountains and the sky. The occasional flash of orange is the reflection of village street lamps and intersection traffic lights on the glass. Your eyelids begin to grow heavy. Not because the story is dull, it is your body telling you that you have walked far enough. The giant wild goose pagoda in the early morning. The Tang dynasty behind a pane of glass in the museum. The 6,000 different faces in Pit 1, the stitches on the kneeling archer's soul from 2,200 years ago, the umbrella that could turn on the bronze chariot, the 43-degree hot spring water of Huaqing Pool rising over your wrist, the stone bench halfway up Mount Li, and the sunset falling in the direction of Chang'an. Your head slowly slides toward the window, your forehead finding a small depression in the cool glass, exactly the curve of your skull. You fall asleep in the seat. Only a few minutes. Perhaps 2 bus stops, perhaps 3. But in those few minutes, you have a dream. In the dream, you are in a very, very dark place. You can see nothing at all, but you can feel 6,000 people around you, standing quietly, making no sound. And you know they are there, just as you know your own heartbeat is there, The bus arrives at the bell tower stop. You wake, but not to the sound of the announcement, to the light. The bell tower's light. The warm white glow on its golden roof. The contour lights on its upturned eaves. The headlights and street lamps and neon signs of the 4 great avenues of east, west, south, and north, all flooding through the window at once, flooding into your newly opened eyes. You get off and stand at the entrance to the bell tower underpass. This time, you do not take the underpass. You stand at the roadside, watching the bell tower through the stream of traffic. It is entirely different from the first time you saw it at dusk yesterday. Yesterday, it was a strange ancient building. You knew it was old, but you did not know it. Today, you know it. You know every great brick at its base. They are of the same era as the bricks of the city wall, from the hands of the same craftsmen. You know the sound those bronze bells on its eaves make in the evening breeze. The old man playing the June flute you heard last night by the moat. His flute notes and the sound of those bronze bells, stirred by the wind, overlapped on certain nights hundreds of years ago. You know that the bell tower's bell once opened the 4 gates of Chang'an every morning, and the drum tower's drum closed them every evening. And you entered through the south gate yesterday, and again through the south gate tonight. You are the last person to enter the city. The drum has not been struck for over 600 years, but it has struck once. You are home. You stand beneath the bell tower, looking at this ancient building you first saw yesterday. 24 hours from not knowing it to knowing it. The distance between you and this city has shifted from a tourist in an ancient city to a person in a city closing their eyes to sleep on the same night. You turn and walk toward the hotel. Yesterday, when you walked this road, you were lost. Today, you do not need to look at your phone. Your second night in Xi'an, and your last. After daybreak, you will leave. For the next place or for home. The now is not the time to think about after daybreak. Now you'll lie in bed, just like last night, a sliver of moonlight slipping through the curtain gap, the gray tiled rooftops outside the window, like quiet fish scales in the moonlight, the giant wild goose pagoda still there in the distance. A pagoda that has not slept for 1300 years, still sleepless tonight, but you do not worry about it. It is used to this. In your mind, you count everything you saw today. The old man practicing Tai Chi in the early morning at the giant wild goose pagoda square. The arc of his arm pushing outward so slow, it barely moved. That bowl in the Shaanxi History Museum. The rim perhaps still holding the warmth of someone's lips from the Tang dynasty, separated from you by 1 centimeter of glass. The 6,000 people in pit 1 facing east, standing for 2,200 years without turning around, stitches carved into their souls, fingers still curved in the shape of holding a bow. That umbrella pole that could turn, something a craftsman made on an afternoon no one witnessed for another person sweating under the sun. The moment the hot spring of Huaqing Pool rose over your wrist, 43 degrees, all your weariness dissolving in the water, the sun setting in the direction of Chang'an as you descended the mountain, your last look back at Mount Li. It had become a black figure lying on its side, asleep on the eastern edge of the plain. The 6,000 terracotta warriors still stand in the darkness at the foot of Mount Li. They do not need to sleep. They are the night watchmen, keeping vigil for Qin Shi Huang for 2,200 years. And tonight, they keep watch for you too. You can sleep now. You have walked every road this city holds, from east to west, from 2,000 years ago to today. Now, breathe deep. Breathe in the scent of monk leaves pine resin halfway up the mountainside, blended with hot spring vapor. And breathe out the dream you dreamed on the bus from Lintong back to Xi'an. Good night, Chang'an. Good night.